Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Runners Roundtable, where today I am talking to Amanda Katz. And I don't even want to say Run Coach Amanda Katz because you do so much more than that. And one of the things that I love about you and your messaging is very much the embracing of movement, not necessarily as medicine, whereas where I'm at, which I think that is part of your message, where movement is medicine, but also how movement can feel good and embracing movement as something that is a part of life and that we do for fun, not that we're doing it to look a certain way or to achieve a specific result. I just get the feeling from you that it's in your work with people, and I'm making a big assumption here, so you'll have to correct me, but that in your work with people, it's about elevating movement to something more that makes life more fulfilling.
No need to correct you. You nailed it. You nailed it. I love that assessment of my philosophy. I love the way that you articulated it. I am a believer in I think that joyful movement, there's this notion of joyful movement, which is not a bad thing. I think it's a really challenging concept for people to not only wrap their head around, but achieve. So I like to meet people where they're at and create more of a neutral approach. And hopefully throughout our process working together, whether it's my one-on-one clients or in my classes, you find fulfillment in what you're doing. It doesn't mean that the task, the exercise, the session, the quality workout isn't going to be tough. Most of it will feel hard because it is hard and to do some days, but yet at the same time we can find fulfillment in that and still come back to it as an opportunity for growing ourselves. So that would be my only addition to what you said. Nailed it.
Awesome. So before I dive deeper into what you just said, can you tell us a little bit about your running story? When did you start running and how have you evolved as a runner since you started?
Sure. So I personally didn't find a meaningful relationship with running until probably my late 20s. So before then, I ran when I traveled, which was a couple of times a year, and it was a way for me to explore the world on my feet without pressure, right? All right, I'm gonna go 10 minutes one way and then 10 minutes make it back to the Airbnb. There was no pressure to perfect it. And finally in 2020, the year I signed up for my first half marathon earlier in that year, simply because I wanted to work towards a goal, and I realized how much I enjoyed time on my feet, and the half marathon felt like a good distance for that. And an added bonus was that it was blocks away from my apartment in Manhattan, right in Central Park. So, but unfortunately, as we know, due to the pandemic, many of us had canceled races, and this race ended up being one that was canceled. It was the women's, the Shape Women's Half Marathon in Central Park. But because I had trained for it, I ended up running the same route, double loop of Central Park solo. And that was my first quote unquote race experience. I wouldn't even really say that. And since then, I really fell in love with the process of training. For me, I am an introvert, as vocal as I can be with my clients and in my classes. I am an introvert, and races can be really challenging for me, energy for me to be even a part of. So I really love the process of training, and what it's cool to have a race on the calendar. I do feel though, I'm pretty self-motivated to get out the door without a race on the calendar.
Yeah, I was gonna say I am as well, where the pandemic helped me fall deeper in love with running. And it was also just this period of time where there was so much fear, and running was that one place where I could come to just be myself and kind of shed all the fear, shed all the stress. And it was just consistency. It was consistency throughout that. And it makes my heart so happy to hear that you still did the run and you did it. And I also want to thank you for acknowledging that races are hard with all the people. That's something that it's taken me a while to understand, that they're two very different experiences. The process of training is one, and then the process of going through a race is totally different. So it's just because you have a great, and that's part of it, right? Just because you have a great training cycle, it doesn't mean you're going to have a great race experience, because there's all these other factors that come into it that honestly we don't practice. I normally, like, I have for those of you who are listening to this, you'll kind of know where I'm at in time, or where this conversation happened in time. But on Sunday, I have a half marathon. It's the Miami half marathon. And it's, I'm excited about it. But at the same time, I'm a little nervous because it's 18,000 runners. There's a lot of people that are going to be moving in and out of the city. And that really
Wow.
does, yeah, it does kind of change the experience. It's not like my regular Saturday long runs where I'm running with like 2 or 3 people. Here it's, I'm going to be running with 18,000 other people constantly surrounded. So I want to thank you for acknowledging that, because that's something that's really important for people to remember when they're thinking about themselves as a runner, is that who you are as a runner isn't the same every single day, because the stressors on you are different. And I love that you said that you came to have a meaningful relationship with running. What was your relationship with running prior to that, or prior to it becoming something more impactful for you?
Sure. Well, I think it actually feeds off of what you just said about the need for control, right? I think runners in particular, a lot of my runners and myself included, we we want to control all the elements, or as many of the elements as possible. The racing environment actually tests that. And we get to exercise very differently this practice of letting that shit go.
Yeah.
You know, you cannot control anything around you on race day. The people, the weather, the environment, how the bed is going to feel in your hotel, how the meal that you packed that you can stand behind, you know it's not going to upset your stomach. Maybe something, maybe something else upset it. So for me, my evolution kind of came to, in the beginning, I felt in order to be a successful runner, the elements had to be within control, and that I always had to be getting faster.
Yeah.
And now I don't give a shit about how fast I'm going. I noticed that letting go of that thought opened me up to actually enjoying myself in the experience. And I ended up running more miles, which, and this in turn ended up allowing the process to feel easier on my body, because I let go of that stress of perfecting it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar phase, and it's a really hard phase to be in when everything around us talks about pace, or there's so many metrics that people use to measure their quote unquote progress in the sport. And I get it. You know, I was there when I first started running. That's how I understood that I progressed, because I either ran more miles or my paces got faster for me. Then I had an experience that really changed all of that for me. And I started to focus more on feeling. How can I feel stronger? How can I feel happier? How can I feel more joy? How can I not feel like crap, or right? Like, or not not overthink my runs, because that was definitely something that was happening to me when I was focusing so much on pace and metrics and nailing all the numbers. It's that I overthought everything, and it just wasn't enjoyable anymore. But I find that it is really hard, and I have to constantly check myself whenever I go on social media and I see people posting their times or their workouts or PRs or this or that. And it's like, okay, this, I can be, I think I'm trying to get myself to a space where I can be happy for that person and know that my journey is different and does not reflect that. And that does not need to reflect me. But it is really hard. When you, I guess before I ask this question, how did you come to run coaching?
I came to run coaching because folks in my network, I have a background in, I was teaching interval tread classes, and I still do here at Equinox in New York City. So I teach a number of group fitness classes, tread classes being one of them, and several of my students uh, who are regulars of mine on the tread happened to also ask me if I was into coaching them individually to prepare them for upcoming races. And I didn't have the credentials, but I wasn't opposed to getting them. And RRCA at the time was doing a ton of online workshops. And so that's kind of how I started. And I just signed up for the first course that I could get into. And I got knee deep in all things running, gait analysis, biomechanics. And to this day, I'm knee deep. I have a book on hold at the library I'm going to after this. So that's how I got here. Yeah.
I love that because I feel like once you fall down the rabbit hole with running, you're always in that rabbit hole with running. I have a book downstairs that I got last week, and I cannot wait to dive into it because it's a book with training plans written by a woman, which really excites me because all the books I have been written by men. So it is fun to kind of see just a different perspective, see what she brings to the table. The question I was going to have for you was, when you have runners or you have athletes come to you and you can see, oh, you're over focusing on the thing, I don't want to call it the wrong thing, but the thing that's preventing you from succeeding in the way that you want to succeed. How do you have that conversation with them? Because that's something that I feel like I'm talking to a wall sometimes with people when I try to tell them, hey, let's not focus so much on pace. Let's focus on your effort and how are you feeling when you're running, or let's get you to connect to, can you feel the pace without looking at the pace? So can you assess your effort levels and understand what that looks like or how that translates pace wise? And I find that that's a little bit hard for people to kind of grasp, and they really want to stick to the paces. And for me in particular, and I don't know if you have this as well, but I live in Miami, Florida, and the heat is really tricky when it comes to sticking to very specific paces. For a lot of people, or at least myself, it's hard to stick to certain paces when it's 90 degrees outside. I have to adjust, and even then it's hard to adjust because my ego starts to get into it, and it's a whole other thing. So how do you handle those conversations with athletes, or have you had to have those conversations with any of the people you work with?
We have to meet people where they're at, right? And there's this process of unlearning that has to take place. And so in some people's minds, their measurement of success has been it's been the numbers. And what I'm constantly reinforcing in all of my weekly check-ins with my runners, anytime something comes up, oh, there's a pain here, there's that the metrics, whether that's heart rate, whether that's pace, it's a guide, it's not God. And
Ooh.
I take it.
I'm writing
And
that one down. That's so good.
it's a guide, not God. And that in order for our bodies to perform at its maximum potential, we have to learn effort. We have to learn effort. And the only way to really learn effort, specifically when it comes to running, is slowing the hell down. Leaning into easy effort running. Does that mean easy effort run isn't going to feel hard on a day where you've had very little sleep? Maybe you didn't fuel correctly. Maybe you got into a fight with your boss or your spouse. But really figuring out, okay, this is what my body feels like when I am running at a conversational, mouth closed, shoulders relaxed, easy effort. And then we build from there. And so when I start with a runner, there's this base building phase, and that's what we focus on. So that's one way. And I think that a part of my job, I think it's how all potential clients should hire a coach is, of course, the credentials and experience are necessary. But having empathy is life-changing. And so I have to understand where this person is coming from. I have to understand that the human in them just wants to feel seen, wants to feel successful, just wants to get kudos on Strava. But I also have to practice what I preach as a coach. And that means for me, a year ago, I turned off the pace and the calorie metrics on my Strava. I noticed that as a coach, it was not helpful. Even though I was posting, hey, I did my long run today. I still need to brag about that. I feel good about that. And I encourage that with my athletes. Brag about your successes. But there are certain successes that may not be helpful. And so one of the successes and one of the metrics that was unhelpful for me personally were those two metrics. So I eliminated them. And I noticed that they were not helpful for my athletes who were looking to me as an example. So I also have to drink the Kool-Aid, right? So a part of it is those one-on-one interactions, right? The ones that you initially asked about. And the second part is, what am I doing as a runner, as a coach, as an athlete to combat this in running culture? Because it is an issue.
I love that, because that is something where it's all of this. It's so I have been in the sport for over a decade at this point, and I've reflected a lot. These conversations have given me so much to reflect upon. And I've reflected on how when I started running, it was all about, if you want to get fast, you run fast. Like that was it. There was no variety in paces. It was just, if you want to get fast, you run fast. And I've seen it, I don't know if it's necessarily a pendulum, but things are definitely going in the direction of, no, if you want to get fast, you have to run slow. And that's why I say it's hard even for myself of confronting my ego as to what I think, quote unquote, think I should be doing pace wise, because of how many years I've been in this sport and where should I have progressed to. So I love that when you said it's a process of unlearning, because all of this is unlearning the unhealthy or unhelpful messages that have dominated the running industry for so long. And it really is, you're absolutely right, where it is up to us. And I say this all the time too, that those of us who are in running, we are the sports biggest ambassadors and advocates. Like, we are the ones. So I definitely reflect a lot on what messaging am I sending out whenever I share anything about my runs, or if I'm sharing something. And I always kind of go back and forth on sharing my paces, because I'm like, is this helpful? Is this not helpful? Is this, is someone going to see that? And I guess it kind of goes back to trying to, and we're jumping ahead here, but I cannot wait to hear your answer to that question. But it is trying to figure out of like, what is in service, not only to myself, but to the people who look to me as whether or not you and I want to embrace it or not, right? Like, as experts in this field, what is it that we want people to learn from us? And how do we want to take that information? Because I find that it is a very, very, very fine line that some runners walk between feeling worthy and feeling valuable just as they are, but then having it connected to their running of, if they don't hit those paces or they don't get the PR, then somehow they're a bad runner or they did something wrong. And it's like, no, there's so much that goes into it. So I love the metrics are a guide, not God, because it's this reminder that there is so much else that comes into it. And I don't know if you experience this as well, where it's just, there are days where I feel like I'm swimming upstream to some of the messaging that's out there. And I'm like, I just want to shout it from the rooftops of no, like, not necessarily no, you're going to believe what you're going to believe, but just this desiring people to be open to approaching things differently, so that they can have more enjoyment in the sport, but then also realize that they can unlock a different version of themselves as an athlete if they just let go.
If we want to talk about beliefs, I think another critical quality when finding a good coach, and in general, just any professional that you are wanting to hire, is the professional, when new information becomes acceptable, are you willing to change your opinion on it? And if that person is, no, of course not, that can't be true, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag. The science is there. The science says that easy running will improve your aerobic capacity. That is the science. You can believe it or not, that's the science. Okay? So let's start there. And at the same time, in the same breath, how do we get faster? We have to practice. We have to practice fast running, and there's a place for it. And we know from the science that it's around 20% of your week time on your feet should be hard running. That's what we know. So you can believe what you can believe, but also be open and willing, to your point, exactly what you said, Stephanie, to when new information is available, moving forward with that. And opening yourself up to that as a runner and as a coach.
Yeah. And even a lot of what I do or how I operate definitely comes from a very embodied experience. So it's, once I get new research, I'm like, well, let me try it out. Like, I need to know what this feels like. So then when I tell you to do it, not that I know 100% your experience of it, but I can kind of anticipate how you are going to feel. So that was, for me, probably more sincerely over the last 2 years where I have tried to embrace okay, let me slow down and the slowing down. And funny enough, for me, the slowing down was the easy part. It was the ego that was the hardest part. It was oh my God, I'm getting slower. Regardless of the fact that I felt great when I finished, right? I would finish my run and I would feel great. And I'd be like, wow, that was awesome. I don't feel like death. That was great. But then I would look at the time and I'd be like, I'm getting slower. Is this what happens when, and then I start, because again, I can overthink and I start thinking, oh, that's it. I've peaked. I'm done. I'm never going to get faster again. And yet, like, and this is the truth. Like, this is the truth of my
Put her out to
experience.
pasture.
Yeah, totally. I was like, that's it. Like, okay, now we're gonna run for fun for the rest of our lives. And even then, right now, I'm in this, yeah, right. Like, and even then, I'm in this funky space of I know that there's hard work to be done with running, but I don't know if I'm in a space of wanting to do the hard work to get specific times. So I'm in this weird space of, yeah, give me all the miles, I'll do the workouts. But again, like we were talking about at the beginning, but I don't know if I'm in the mental space to put all that together on race day. And that's just where I'm at right now.
And that's okay.
And it's okay,
and
right?
honestly, that's okay. Like, and give yourself grace in that, right? And also be okay with the fact that this is what's true for this season of your life. And that if we have this same conversation at this time next year, you may be in a very different season of your life. No, you definitively will be.
Oh, for sure. Listen, if we even go back a year, I would have said, no, I'm never running another marathon again. And here I am training for a marathon. So like, I don't trust anything I say at this point when it comes to running. Like, we'll just stay open. If someone is interested in working with you, what is that process like? Are they reaching out to you via Instagram, your website? Is there a consultation call? And I'm also curious because you had mentioned working with people through a base building phase. Is there a time period that you like to start working with people? Because I feel like most people come to a run coach when they have a race 5 months from now, and that's like what they want to do. But I'm curious if you prefer to work with people beyond that time frame.
I do. And it's kind of how my approach to fitness in general, which is it should be a part of your life and not just the end event. I'm the same way in my personal training business. If a client comes to me because she is, or anyone is looking to get ready for their wedding, want to shed, but I won't take them as a client. I'm not a finish line trainer. I'm not a weight loss coach as well. I'm looking to make fitness more accessible for all bodies, and I want it to be a sustainable part of your life that enhances your life, right? So it's my preference to not work with folks who are just looking for that short-term success thing. I also recognize that coaching is an investment, and we don't always have the financial resources to invest in a coach long-term, and I respect that and understand that. I also know that I am not for everyone, and that is okay. I'm currently a run coach at Running Explained. But prior to that, I still have my running clients that I had a good amount of running clients prior to getting hired on Elizabeth Stott's team, wonderful team. And my process was pretty similar to the process we have at Running Explained as well. So the person would reach out to me either via website. Instagram is the channel that I get the most messages from. And the person would reach out to me asking if I was taking clients. I would share I would ask them to review my services on my website, which I still do. And at that point, we would schedule a chat, 15, 20, 30-minute chat, and just to go over what they're looking for in a coach and what their short-term, long-term goals are. And then I like to be very straightforward with people on, prior to going on to Running Explain, I'm very upfront with people on prices and agreements and cancellation. And I want them to know that I'm a direct and honest person. And then we take it from there. There's a questionnaire as well prior to that conversation. We go over anything that was outstanding in that. And the same, it's a very similar process on the Running Explain team. They go through an onboarding call initially with our head coach, who I just referenced before, head coach and founder Elizabeth Scott, and then she sees who would be the best fit for that potential client. And so I have a good amount of clients from them, and I have more clients from my previous run coaching experience.
First question that I have is, how did you come to have so much confidence in yourself? Because it is hard, to, I feel like, come to a place where you know that you're not for everyone and then you own it. Because a lot of people, particularly when they're new to something, or I feel like within fitness, and it's the same. I have a similar experience with yoga, where when I first started, and even now, there's almost this, like, you have to take everyone. You have to take everyone if you want to survive, and you have to accept everyone. And it took me a while as well to be like, no, I'm not for everyone. Like, there is a very specific population that I like to work with. There's a specific population that, when I say I like to work with them, it's because I thrive as a teacher working with them. And then I just bring my best self to every single interaction because we've had conversations and whatnot. So now I feel like I can say, no, these are the type of people I like to work with. And I'm okay with that because I've gone through the experience of trying to work with everyone and have it be either really frustrating or like I was somebody's mother. I think that was just the big one, where I felt like I'm someone's mother trying to get them to do things. And it's like, no, I don't want to be your mom. Like, you're an adult, I'm an adult. Like, this is a relationship we're coming to. And if we can't be adults together in it, then I'm not for you. And it's totally okay. I don't take it personal, but I have experience. So I'm curious for you, how did you come to that place of saying, I know I'm not for everyone, and I own that, and it's totally cool?
Well, it was a process. I entered the fitness industry full time about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And prior to that, I had only known the corporate world. I worked in nonprofit management and government as well. And I was the director of communications. I managed social media, public relations, got really good at communicating with folks through my job, through my education, through my graduate school. However, I often found that being a young person in leadership, being a young woman in leadership, I was walked all over. So I would do things like overcompensate.
Mm-hmm.
And I would put in extra hours and not be paid for it. And I would show up early and I would leave late, and I would offer to do more, and I would get paid the same. And at the same time, while this was happening, but I was a very high performer. At the same time, I was also suffering from multiple eating disorders, which it's very connected. It's very connected. The need to be in control, the need to be seen, perfectionism. And I was going through this. I finally got tired of my own shit. Truly. And I got tired of living in this scarcity mindset that I wasn't going to have enough if I didn't do all these things. I started to leave that job slowly. I was, at the same time, I found that group fitness was a community for me that I felt very comfortable in while I was working in the corporate world. And I had taken steps back from it when my eating disorder was really challenging, that I had nutritionally rehabilitated, so I was in a safe place to get back to group fitness. And I always felt safe in that space. And I kept going. So then I got more curious with fitness, and I started to go knee deep, as we discussed earlier. I was down the rabbit hole in all things exercise science. And I thought to myself, if I could figure out how to make a life be financially comfortable in this role, I think I would be at peace. This is something that would not only give me purpose, but I would feel like my most authentic self in. I can lead a room, and I can also move my body, and I can ultimately make other people feel safe moving in their bodies. So that's what I did. And then I think in the beginning, you go through that same growth phase. Anytime you start something new, we're like, do people think I'm working? Do people think I'm doing enough? What if no one comes to my class? What if no one wants to be my client? And you have to let that go at a certain point. Because in the beginning, as I'm sure it's similar for you, take everyone. I worked 7 days a week. I taught 6 a.m. classes. I taught 8 p.m. classes. It was incredibly unfulfilling in that sense.
Yeah.
And then once I was comfortable enough to financially to be like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Between my savings account, I've built this retirement fund from my previous job. I'm going to be okay. Let me take a step back. And then when you take a step back, other opportunities come in that fit. And then you start to work smarter, not harder. And these things start to happen. And I'm finally in a place where I am not overworked. I am paid in a place that feels right for me right now, and I am bringing value. And I feel very at peace with that. But it takes all of the ebbs and flows to get there.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I remember my first few years of teaching yoga and how I would feel bad after certain classes because I didn't know if anyone was going to come, or 1 to 2 people came. Like it was really, really rough. And thankfully, I'm no longer there. I can't even say when the turning point happens. I think it is very much what you said, those ebbs and flows of it. And just experience of working with different people, of knowing that there are, I don't want to generalize by saying that there's different types of people, but you know, when we're talking about run coaching, you're going to have people who are very motivated to do the work, and then you're going to have people who are not motivated to do the work, who they want to coach for accountability, but they're not willing to be held accountable because they're not doing the things that would make them accountable. And there is a learning process with that of, okay, how do we have these tough conversations? So my question for you is, in the people you have worked with, has there ever been a moment where you're like, we need to have a tough conversation to figure out if this relationship is going to work? Or even when you're having that initial consult intro conversation, how do you have that conversation of, you know what, you're great, your goals are awesome, I really want to see you achieve them, but I'm not a good fit for you, and I don't think you're a good fit for me?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said. It's well, why were you interested in hiring a personal trainer? Why were you interested in hiring a run coach? And putting the question on them. Because the truth of the matter is, you will not waste my time. And I will not waste yours. It's that is the most precious resource, is our time. And so rest assured, if you are not the client for me and I am not the coach for you, we're both okay with that, because someone else will come. And I have to be confident in that as a coach, and not believe that, oh my gosh, that means the money's gonna run out if I don't take this one. No, I have, and that person has to be confident enough to say, or really to question for a second, hey, why did I reach out for coaching? What do I need that I'm not getting currently? And I always want to be honest with people. I also find I have clients who are I work with one-on-one more frequently than my weekly check-ins with my running clients. And if I see a pattern in cancellations, I'll ask them, do you want to continue working together right now? It doesn't seem like this is a priority right now. And that's okay. And it also, so it does one of two things. Maybe it's not a priority, and maybe training for them right now isn't what works. But the other thing that may happen is that person needed to have a tough conversation in order to move forward with the work we do.
Yeah, and I feel like
I consider that a win-win.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I feel like sometimes the tough conversations have to be had so that they understand you're not going to take it personally. Because I feel like when it's an uncomfortable conversation, sometimes you get people, they'd rather avoid having the conversation than having it. And it's like, I try to tell people that too, where it's, I won't take it personally. I don't take it personally. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I read this book on boundaries. And one of the things that I loved the most from that book was the concept of not right now. And I feel like sometimes people need that permission as well from whoever they're working with, of like, hey, I get it. If this doesn't work right now, you can take a break. Now, whether that break is indefinite, that's okay. But again, sometimes I feel like people need to hear the not right now and the I'm not going to take it personal. It is. And I think what you're talking to as well is the energetic exchange that happens in a coach-athlete relationship. So I want to make that really clear for everyone who's listening. And I know I've said this before, where your coach is not just a training plan. Your coach is someone who's invested in your training as much as you are. Your coach will not do the work for you, but your coach is just as invested. And with that investment comes that emotional load of thinking about their training. How can you support them throughout their training? What are factors in their life that are affecting their training? So it's not just, oh, you pay me and I give you a training plan and then we're done. No, the training plan is like the very bottom, I feel, of a lot of run coaching athlete relationship. That's like the bottom. of what you're actually doing in that relationship. So I think even going back to what you said of figuring out from a person, and I always ask everyone, why do you want this? So even going back and saying like, why are you interested in hiring a coach? What do you feel you would get from having a coach, or what's lacking in your life right now, or what's missing in your movement pattern right now that you feel getting a coach is going to help? Because again, I think a lot of people come to run coaches because they want something different, or they want accountability, or they want the training plan, and they don't realize that what they're getting is an actual relationship with another human being who has taken the time and will take the time to understand the person that fuels the athlete. So
it's we need to know those things, because exercise, our training plan, like you said, is that is one stressor on this athlete, on this human. There's so many other things that are a part of the athlete's life, a part of the human's life, that as run coaches, we need to take into account when working with our athletes. Their relationships, their families, how chaotic their job is, what's going on with daycare, what's going on with chronic pain, illness, what's going on in the home, right? All these factors outside of the training that impacts the athlete, we have to be conscious of. And I don't know that all coaches look at it through the lens that you so eloquently put it through. I know that I do as well, as it's a non-negotiable. I have to ask. I have to know these things. It's a part of that comes with the coach. That comes with the coach for sure for me.
yeah. Besides empathy, how else would you describe your coaching style?
I would say that my style is a little, it has a hint of humor, some tough love, mainly because I think runners and a lot of folks in general whose sport is a part of their identity, they so strongly identify with it, they take themselves too seriously. And they take what we were talking about earlier, the metrics, too seriously. And exercise, for me, it's stressful enough on our bodies. So my thing is, let's not add to our own bullshit. And let's have conversations instead of preaching to our clients. So I would say that's my style. That's my style. And it also means, and I want people to know that, you know, of course, that your body can become stronger in their sport of choice, whether it's running or not, and that it should feel accessible to them.
I love it because I'm just someone who loves to know the context, because it gives me a lot of information in terms of how far you can push someone in their training, and like, you know, where can you, it's like this it is a fine balance between challenging workouts and easy workouts. And it is that of, the more I know about your life off the run, and it's not that I need to know everything, but if I know that, hey, you're in a particularly stressful season at work where the next month you have all this stuff going on, that's really good information, because then the workouts can reflect that. And I think you've said it at some point where it's like, stress is stress on the body, right? Like your body isn't, if it's stressed out, you're stressed out. But if you're telling me, oh, the next few weeks are going to be really easy, I'm going to get so much sleep, then okay, let's actually challenge the running there, because you're going to have not only the physical energy for it, but the mental clarity to get through the work. So knowing what's going on in a person's life is really helpful. And also it's just, that's part of it. When you know what's going on in someone's life, you can tailor their training to fit them. But if you don't, you're just going to make a plan that, you know, what's going to happen. The person's going to either do it and then they're going to get injured or burn out, or they're not going to do it at all because they're just going to be like, fuck this. Like, I'm done with it. So it is. And I love that. Let's not add to our own BS, because it is. It is. We stand in our own way all the time. All the time. If you had to sum up your coaching philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
My philosophy is based on the idea that all bodies deserve a fitness experience without the shame and fear of being judged for how they show up.
You know, that's beautiful, because then that's going to lead us into this question, which is usually the last one, but there's other threads that I want to pull from you before we finish, is how do we make the sport of running more accessible and inclusive? Given your
for starters,
philosophy. Yeah, I was going to say, given your
for
philosophy.
starters, we need to see more runners who do not look like me. And in case you're listening to this and you're not watching this, or you haven't seen a photo or engaged with me online, I live in a straight size body, straight size, able body. We need to see more runners who do not look like me, and we need to get honest about our why for running, right? So not everyone wants to go out and run half marathons and ultra marathons and hit certain paces. Some folks just want to go out and get 20 minutes of fresh air, you know. I think another way to make running more accessible is running is so interesting, because folks feel like if they're not shooting for that next PR, they're not growing. And that's not the case. And I think that's another way that we need to make running more accessible. And speaking of races, I also think that making people who run slower paces, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-minute miles, putting these people in poorly staggered start times. I'm talking to you, New York City Marathon, poorly staggered start times, right? It's so unmotivating to run into the darkness. The sun is setting, the cheering is gone. It's not great. And I think we could do better for the folks who live in bodies who run slower. I think running, you know, I also think that running for those with disabilities is another important part of fitness. I do know that New York Roadrunners here in New York City does a solid job with their Achilles team. So that's another way we can make it more accessible. And lastly, I think we will always be fighting to make running more financially accessible. It's not as simple as like, you just need a body to run. No, it can be an expensive sport. The more time you invest in it, the gear, the fuel, if you like races, the travel expenses. If you live somewhere that's unsafe to always run outside, then you need to have accessibility to a treadmill. So I wish it was just as simple as putting on a pair of shoes, right? But we know it's so much more than that. So I think those are think I nailed. I think I hit all the points
Oh
that
no,
I would,
you gave
if I had
us
a wish
a,
list.
yeah, I was gonna say that was like a good plan right there.
If I
And
had a
I
wish
even,
list, that would be my wish list of acceptability.
yeah, and I have been reflecting a lot on racing again. So we're gonna kind of come back to that racing idea, because when I first started running, I'm very fortunate that I live in a city where there are a lot of racing events that take place here. I have a car, I can drive to them. Got the means that if I want to drive 3 hours away, 4 hours away to do a Disney race, like that's a possibility for me. But when I first started running and people would come to me and ask me about running and, oh, I really want to get into running, what do I do? I would always tell them, hey, sign up for a race. Like, sign up for a race. It'll give you an end date to work towards. It'll help motivate you if you're someone who needs a date. And now, now that I think a little bit more, and after all these conversations, I'm like, well, that's not the best suggestion anymore, because some race environments are not made for people who aren't front of the pack or mid pack runners. And I love how you pointed out New York City, because I'm going to point out my own Miami race here, where on Sunday it's the half marathoners and the full marathoners, or half marathoners and marathoners. They all start at the same time. There's different corrals. And instead of having all the marathoners start first, they're mixed into different corrals. And this is a race, and it's the same, it's a very similar thing where I'm curious to see what the numbers are this year. But in previous years, it would be 20,000 people running the half and 3,000 people running the marathon. And there does get a point where it's like, well, who's out there still supporting these people? There's excellence. And I've done both. I've done both Miami races. I've done the half marathon. And then one year I did the marathon because I was like, I want to run my city and all of that and just know. But it was such a different experience. Once the course split, where half marathoners went to the finish line, marathoners continued on the second half, I felt like I was by myself and I was on a training run. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I would never. And if any, there are people I know who love the Miami Marathon. There are people who've had great experiences. For me, I did not, because it was just such a vastly different experience that I'm like, I won't do that particular race again. But even then, that's like a seed that was planted. Then I have all these conversations with you coaches, and the racing environment has come up several times where it's like, oh, that's right. As someone who's a middle of the pack runner, I never really stopped to think about, hey, that person who's last. And I've had people tell me stories of, they're out on the course and they're breaking down certain tables. They're breaking down. I think one of the other coaches as well, she talked about how they were breaking down the finish line when like the last few people were coming in. And it's like, well, I can't talk. Absolutely. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell people to sign up for a race anymore, because the race can be an environment that actually takes away that motivation, takes away that excitement for them. So it's, yeah, I mean, you hit them all. And I just love that. And I have one final question that I was curious, because it also came up in another discussion, and I would love to hear your perspective on it in terms of working with people. And we'll keep it specific to the run coaching, of working with people if they reach out to you and they say, oh, I want to run to lose weight. And that was like a thread that I'm curious to hear, because you said that's not who you would work with, or that's just not a population you would work with. And I was curious because in my experience, a lot of people that I know that have gotten into running or who are now consistent runners, that was their first entry into the sport. And they thought they wanted to come into running to lose weight. But then once they built the habits of it, all of a sudden that weight, what brought them to the door and maybe helped them take their first step through the door, is not what has kept them on the other side. So does that come up for you? Or I guess in conversations with people, when they say, oh no, I want to do this to lose weight, is there any kind of probing that you do to figure out, is this your real goal or is this what you think your goal is?
Yes. Yes. I never want to discount somebody's goal, right? I think that that's a part of having empathy as a coach.
Mm.
You know, because somebody's coming to you with this as a goal, I want to ask them why that's a goal. What's important to them about running being the thing that helps them with weight loss. And I also want to be very honest with them. So if a runner comes to me and they want to work, they want to work with a run coach. They also are curious about training for an upcoming half marathon. I have to be very honest about how performance will be negatively impacted if they are not properly fueled. I have to be honest about it. I have to be honest with the fact that the majority of the food that they should consume to fuel their performance and then ultimately to, you know, to fuel their lives when they are in training, specifically when it comes to halves and full and I almost said full marathon again. Oh my gosh.
I know. I try to
Marathons,
not say that. I'm like,
I
stop
know.
with the full marathon. It's just a marathon.
And I always joke with people because people who don't, some of my family members who aren't as familiar with the sport, which did you do a, was it a 5K marathon or was it, I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't have to
Those are my favorite.
educate now. It's so much, it's so much. What I find is that, so, and I have to educate and share that carbs are going to be their lifeline. Carbs and recovery is going to be their lifeline in when they are training. And in order to maximize their training, they will need to eat. And so I would not take training as an opportunity to lose weight. And I also, just from having a background in personal training, folks come to us all the time. Like, oh, if I do all these classes and I do this, and I have to remind them that in order to lose weight, very plain and simple, your body has to be in a caloric deficit. That's the truth. Something's going to give. But to go back to the beginning, I went on a tangent after I realized that I had said full marathon.
Listen,
We gotta ask our cringe.
I cringe anytime I say full marathon. I'm like, no.
We have to ask them why they're coming to us for that. And I would never say, absolutely not. I'm not going to work with you because this is your goal. Because to your point, many of us enter running with that in our minds. And that's okay. And when new information is provided, to come back to that, we get better. We become open to it. And then we enjoy the process a bit more.
Yeah. And that's just, I asked that because it came up in another conversation and I was like, okay, let's kind of dive down this, because I do find that sometimes people will say my goal is to lose weight, but when you start asking those why questions, you realize that that's not even their goal. Like, that's not what they actually want for themselves. That's what they think they should want for themselves because of what society is saying, or because this or because that. So it is, for anyone who's listening to this and they're thinking about, oh, but I want to get a run coach to lose weight, I hope that this is an opportunity for you to ponder, well, what does that actually mean for you? And going back to something that the question you asked earlier is then, what is a run coach going to do for you that you're not already doing for yourself? And it's complicated. I feel like these are all like those complicated parts, even just about like making running more accessible, where we can go down the 6 different things that you mentioned, and even dissecting each of them, we're just going to leave with more questions of, okay, more variety of runners. How do we do that? How do we do that? The not focusing so much on PR, you're a runner regardless of PRs, whatever season. How do we get people to, like, there's always just a how behind any of this. And for me, it really comes back to having these conversations and talking about these things, because then we realize that we're not alone in having these thoughts. And then again, whoever's listening, hopefully they realize, or they feel, to something you said earlier, where it's like you feel validated in knowing that the thoughts you're having, the experience you're having, is acknowledged by at least 2 other people here, acknowledging these things and questioning how we can always do better. And also just that, like, how can we let go to the BS narratives that we're telling ourselves that are standing in the way of us being who we truly want to be?
Well said. Well
Wow.
said.
Thank you. Final question is, tell us where we can connect with you, whether it's your website, online, and also tell us if there is anything fun coming up for you that we can celebrate and cheer you on in.
I am at Amanda_Katz with 2 Z's. So KATZZ on Instagram. And that would be the first stop. And then the second stop, if folks want to learn more about me, it's pretty comprehensive, I think, on my Instagram, but AmandaSKatz.com. Those would be the 2 areas to find me. Say hello. I love having conversations with folks near and far. Exciting things for me. I try to keep one of my things that helps create a safe space around the racing environment, because it feels so overwhelming to me, is I am training for a marathon, but I'm trying to keep this marathon close to me. So I will be running a marathon in another state in April. And I am looking forward to it. And then I'll have a half marathon shortly after, and then I'll have a wedding that I'm gonna be, the bride in shortly after. And then I will be running another marathon in the fall.
There you go. I love it. I feel like I'm talking to a pro athlete right now, where I'm like, oh, when is she going to make the announcement? Is there going to be like this grand video?
It's more for my nerves. It's my nerves, Stephanie. I need to keep something for me. It's like it's mine right now.
It's yours. I love it, but I just feel like I'm like, oh, there's like, now I'm like, I'm gonna pay attention to see, does she drop any clues? Will I figure it out before she does it? Stay tuned, everyone. We can figure this out. Know that whatever it is, we're cheering you on. And it is. And running is one of those things where, for as much as we've talked a lot about the coach athlete relationship, you as a coach, a lot of running is very personal, and it does feel, there's almost like a vulnerability that you feel when you share what your racing plans are and what your goals are. So I think just enjoy this period of cocooning those races to yourself, because at the end of the day, running is for you. No one else.
That's right.
It is for you. Any final words to share with us?
I'm all worded out. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Until the next time, see y'all soon. Bye.
Bye, y'all.